The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
It's a buzzword for conservatives, but it is true, Willie. Identity politics, it will be the undoing of Democrats in 2020, if not 2018. And again, they can shoot the messenger all they want. If we can't get a common message, it doesn't just go one group after another, and you split them up and you balkanize these groups. You tell them they're all victims and everybody's persecuting them. And no, what's the common good? What lifts everybody out of many one? What's that message?
That is the voice of Joe Scarborough from Morning Joe. This morning's episode, February 27th, 2018. I was preparing to do an entirely different podcast this morning, but something has been bothering me for a while that while I've been able to articulate it, I didn't really want to talk about it just yet because it's going to put me at odds with quite a few people. But Morning Joe has provided sufficient catalyst to for me to tell myself I don't care, and we're going to talk about it. I'm not sure that I can tolerate anymore white men, in particular white men, telling the rest of us that identity politics do not matter. I don't care if you're conservative white male. I don't care if you're progressive white male. I don't care if you're liberal white male. I can't really sit by and watch you run that game on America because identity politics has benefited you specifically throughout the entire existence of this country. Don't believe me? Let's listen to Bill O'Reilly as he talks with the then presidential candidate, John McCain, back in 2008. And he so, casually and precisely defines the power structure in the United States of America.
Change, pardon the pun, the whole complexion of America. Am I wrong?
No, you're right. The second thing that on the left they're against is the temporary worker, as you know. They don't want them to have to go back.
But the strategy is
people can come and work.
Do you understand, and I'm not saying this in a condescending way, you're smarter than I am,
Sure.
But do you understand what the New York Times wants and the far left want? They want to break down the white Christian male power structure of which you're a part, and so am I. And they want to bring in millions of foreign nationals to basically break down the structure that we have.
Now, I played it in context, right? But let me emphasize, just so that you are clear, crystal clear on the power structure in the United States, which is the default position, which is clearly an identity.
They want to break down the white Christian male power structure of which you're a part, and so am I.
So you'll understand if that being, something that was discussed on national television with the candidate for the nominee for the Republican Party to be president of the United States, that this is this is such a mainstream concept that it's not even controversial. You'll understand if that's the default position in this country, then I would rightfully have a problem anytime I hear a white male. You don't even have to be Christian, because who's actually taking time to ask you your faith? If you are a white male and you have a problem with identity politics like Joe Scarborough did.
One group after another, and you split them up and you balkanize these groups. You tell them they're all victims and everybody's persecuting them.
And of course, you've got Mika Brzezinski in the background saying, that's right, Joe. That's absolutely right, Joe. You're so spot on this morning. Because there's so many times in history we've seen white women they've been 100% complicit with their white men. But that's an entirely different conversation for an entirely different day. And the reality of it is that America has been run by white Christian men. White men have run this country. They have had the reins of power, economic power, political power. And so if there is an identity problem in the United States of America, it starts first with that identity. Everything in this country caters to the ego, the economics, and the politics of white men. And I'll leave out Christian because really, who's taking time to ask you what your religion is? in terms of the broader conversations, in terms of the amount of wealth that you can amass in this country, in terms of political power, that might be the only area that you are going to be asked about your faith. There's certain offices that you can't hold if you're not a Christian. And so that's why it does matter on different levels. But these are all identities. Every single one of these is an example of an identity. And yet they have the nerve to tell us to not discuss identity politics. In other words, women, put your issues to the side and let's find a unifying theme that all of us can unify behind. Black women, put your issues to the side. Let's not make this about your identity. Never mind the fact that the Democratic Party essentially would not exist without black women. Black men, just, don't be angry. Just stop there, because you're going to look like you're a part of the Nation of Islam, or you're going to be called racist because you discuss these types of things. Like I have been called racist by white liberals because I identify this type of thing. See, this is an ongoing problem. It has never changed. The race in Virginia, they talked about, we should really back away from identity politics because, they're running against the idea, of Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon thinks that identity politics is always going to be an easy win for Republicans. If we have an argument over identity politics, then Republicans will always win. Number one, the Republicans lost the state of Virginia, the governor's seat. Number two, even if Republicans had won, and they won as a result of backlash towards identity politics, then we have a bigger problem in this country. If I have to put my issues to the side, if I have to put them to the side for you to be comfortable or for us to win, you are not my ally. Period. Now, I'm going to talk about this on multiple levels because, of course, you have white conservative men who are different than white liberal men who are different than white progressive men. But they all seem to unify around one singular thing. And don't get me wrong, there's some white women out there. There's some white women progressives. Oh, my God, there are some white women progressives. Hell, there's even a couple black women progressives who are parroting this same exact idea that we should not be concerned with identity politics. It's a fascinating intersection. It's a fascinating intersection where you can get white conservative evangelical men to agree with white neoliberal men, to agree with white progressive men who agree with white progressive women. And then you have a few scattered, black people in there. And let's be sure. Let's be clear. Go back in my catalog. There is a problem with the weaponization of identity politics, right? We did an long before this conversation was a thing this year, Noah Changa and I and Brandon Sutton, the Progressive Army, we have an entire catalog, specifically on my show, an entire catalog where we diagnose the problem of the weaponization of identity politics to the detriment of the black community. But never once would you find us saying that identity does not matter. Identity matters in this country because we are fighting against the supremacy of one particular identity that is the baseline for everything in this country. It's the default position. And by that, I mean, if we don't discuss it, if we just leave identity alone, then we are by default catering to the identity of white Christian men. So forgive me if I get upset when I see so-called allies. I expect this from conservatives. I expect this from Joe Scarborough, because despite the fact that he's on a station that people think is liberal, Joe Scarborough is extremely conservative. So I expect this from him. But understand. I hope that you would understand that it bothers me when I hear this from so-called allies.
It's going to be interesting to see if the Democrats overplay their hand. It's not going to be a layup. They have intensity, they have enthusiasm, they have millennials, they have women, all geared to get out and vote for a Democrat. But if they make the mistake of running on a constant basis, 24 hours a day, Trump, 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 it's not going to be that easy. Yeah. There's something going on in this country. There's a feeling that the country is fractured, that that the country is in need of an emotional fix, that the country has to be brought together, that the country is divided.
And this is the fallacy, right? This is the ignorance and the fallacy of Mike Barnacle, or not just him by himself, but everyone who forwards this idea. They believe that identity politics divides us. But you know who identity politics, when you talk about issues of people of color, immigrants, Muslims, black, brown, any identity, whatever your identity is, you know the only people this divides us from? People who have a problem with what we're fighting for. You know who's currently dividing this country? People who had a tremendous white lash, a backlash to the president of the United States, the first black president of the United States. And you can say what you want to and say that it was economic despair. And yes, I know the numbers that a certain percentage of people who voted for Barack Obama turned around and voted for Donald Trump. But you cannot state that that this is all economically driven. Not when I get regular phone calls calling me a nigger. Not when my co-host Rebecca Azor gets regular phone calls, messages telling her to go back to Africa. Right? These aren't anecdotes. These are regular occurrences in this country every single day. It's not all economic anxiety. Because you know what? They are supporting economic policies that are detrimental to them. They are backing the Republican tax plan that is going to hurt them in a very significant fashion. So how can you say to me, progressives, white progressives, some white women progressives, and about one or two black women progressives, how can you say to me that this is an issue that's solely about, or predominantly about, or whatever weasel word you're going to use, it is about economic anxiety when these people who left Barack Obama to vote for Donald Trump are supporting and championing economic policies from Donald Trump that are going to hurt them. In other words, they ran back to their jaded lover, the Republican Party, to get hurt again economically. So that can't be the sole justification or even the predominant justification for their support for this racist white nationalist identity problem that the United States is having, that is best personified and exemplified by Donald Trump. You cannot. So stop doing it. And then stop running around. You know, this is the other thing that bothers me. Stop running around even talking about this. If this doesn't intersect you, shut the hell up. If you are not in this fight with some identity problem of your own, because, I mean, think about the policies that are hitting people very specifically. These are issues that are hitting them, policies that are hitting them based on their identity. Immigrations and customs enforcement just had a lawsuit against them that says that they just divided a mother and a daughter who sought asylum here in the United States, separated them. This is this morning's news. Separated them, screaming, crying child. That wasn't enough. They separated them by 2,000 miles. And this is a direct result of President Trump's laser-like focus on destroying immigration as we know it. I mean, that's just one story out of hundreds. So if you don't have skin in the game, if all you have to do is write think pieces from the, here's another identity, poverty, right? If you don't actually have skin in the game in poverty, then don't talk about identity politics as if it's something that we should just dismiss. Because poverty is an identity in this country. I'm going to get in a lot of trouble on this episode because I have had enough of this. People telling, particularly because my intersection, I've got male privilege. Sure. Cool. Absolutely. No doubt. But I'm a black man in this country. I'm a black man in this country and a black man who sees all of this happening around us. And in the back of my ear, I hear so-called allies talking about, you know, we just got to stop talking about identity politics. If we run on identity politics, no. Hold on. What identity are you even struggling with? I mean, you're a rich white guy. What are you actually struggling with? So how do you even have the ability to identify with the struggle? You're just tired of hearing about it. You just don't want to hear about it because it makes you uncomfortable. I get it. It's not fun, right? But the reality of it is that it's still there. Whether you want to talk about it or not, it's still underlying in this. It's the baseline position in this country. This country does cater to identity politics. It does cater to certain groups. It does break people up into subgroups and tell them that they're victims. And you know which one that this country primarily has served for the entirety of its existence? White Christian men.
And a lot of people that were concerned that Hillary Clinton was going to lose in the Democratic Party are saying they still don't have a message for the common good. It's for this group. You've been treated badly, right. Group A, and the Democrats going to take care of you. Group B, you've been treated badly, and this is what we're going to do to take care of you. And Group C, you're being treated badly, and this is what and Group D, and so many Democratic strategists say that if you even talk about how this Democratic Party balkanizes voters instead of reaching and looking for the common good for all Americans, that you're suddenly called a racist or you're attacked and you're shunned from the party.
Yeah. Okay, so before I even reply to this part, I have to play it again, a small portion, for emphasis so that you can let the absurdity resonate in you.
They still don't have a message for the common good. It's for this group. You've been treated badly, right. Group A, and the Democrats going to take care of you.
Does anyone see the logical flaw here and the absurdity of it? I mean, okay, the Democrats don't have a message for the common good. They have a message for individual groups, identities. So if the Democrat Party sells itself as a Big Tent, inclusive of as many identities as it possibly can, groups A through Z that have all been slighted in America, who's left? Who's left to represent the common good, Joe? You guys have it yet? If your problem is that the Democratic Party is servicing too many identities and not servicing the common good, but when the Democratic Party is actually servicing everybody except the Republican Party, which is predominantly white Christian men, who are you saying is the common good, Joe? Joe, you're saying that the common good is for every other identity who have legitimate grievances in this country to be quiet. So who are we serving, Joe? You are literally saying here, the subtext of what you're saying is that the common good is for white men. That's like that. He doesn't even realize it. And Willie Geist at the end of the day, he's like, mm-hmm. And then Willie said something that was reasonably poignant and not completely out of the fray. He later on said something ignorant, but Willie, you don't just say you don't just say yes because he's the boss. But I digress. The point is that the absurdity here is that he's saying that it's the responsibility of people with grievances in this country to put those grievances aside in order to serve the common good of white men. Because who's left out? Who's left out? I tell you who's left out of the Republican Party. I tell you who's left out of white evangelical conservative politics in this country. Everyone who's not a white Christian man and their wives.
Common good? What's the common good for the United States of America that the Democratic message has, other than, again, Group A has been afflicted by this. Group B has been afflicted by that. Group C has been afflicted by this. Group D. If you want to be a party of victimhood and party of affliction, like Willie said, you can affect social change. But if you want to be like Barack Obama, you figure out how to unify the party and how you figure out how to unify the country.
And this brings me to the second part of the conversation. I'm going to circle back and talk about identity politics again. But the second part is stop listening to these people, because this politically is a foolish idea. The Democrats should not have the responsibility. Okay, let's just, on general principle, what I call GP, or what we call GP. On GP, the Democratic Party should not have the responsibility of unifying a nation that's broken by republicanism, conservatism, white supremacy, white nationalism, in every way imaginable. The Republican Party has done more in this country to divide us than any other party in the history of this country, save the one save the division just prior to the Civil War. So we didn't break it, Joe. Therefore, it is not our responsibility to fix it. I hear Michelle Obama in the back of my head. When they go low, we go high. Love you, Michelle. But no, that's not what we need right now. The last thing we need is some triangulating Democrat who's going to come in and try to appease this ethno-nationalist movement that is the very base of Donald Trump's support base. And then from there flourishes out to just ye old regular white nationalism too. And then it goes out a little further and it gets broader to ye old people who benefit from white supremacy but won't say anything about it. And then it spreads out to evangelical Christianity who have representatives all the way down to the very bottom, including the ethno state. But these are the people who have divided this nation, and they have a representative in Donald Trump in the White House. They have been the divisive force in this country. And yet you turn around and say that it is a responsibility of the Democratic Party and all of the people from who are inside of the big tent. It is our responsibility to fix this country. That has to be the dumbest political advice that I have seen, particularly because the winds of the discourse in this nation says that we want a fighter. Matter of fact, it's just not the winds. It's the reality that we need a fighter that can go toe to toe with someone as divisive and someone as ignorant and oafish as Donald Trump. There is no, and then I love the B-side of this B-side. I guess that would be the C-side of the conversation. Oh, how the white people love using black people to forward their agenda, even when they're wrong. They want to use Barack Obama's unifying message of 2004. There is no black America. There are no blue states. There are no red states. We're all Americans. And whatever his speech was, right? That, first of all, Obama was wrong. Love him, mean it, but Obama was wrong. And he found out painfully over 8 years just how divided this country is based on partisanship alone. He tried to triangulate. He tried to be the bigger person. He tried to work with them, and they gave him hell and stopped him at every stop, blocked him at every stop. So Barack Obama was wrong. But stop using black folks and co-opting their message and using it for your political agenda. I absolutely cannot. The next person I see who rolls out Martin Luther King or Malcolm X for your agenda, I don't care if you are a white progressive. I don't care who you are. Stop rolling out black people conveniently for your agenda, especially when you're trying to use black people against black people. Conservatives have been doing this for years, right? They love using Martin Luther King. Say, oh, Dr. King would not approve of your approach. Well, we would probably understand that. We would probably be able to hear it directly from his mouth if your folks didn't kill him. It's that kind of day, folks. I really don't have time for it. As much as black folks, as much as we would love, and I'm sure people of Middle Eastern descent, people of the Muslim faith, all the people who are attacked in this country, as much as we would love to live in this utopian yet fictitious harmonious society that people love to say exists if only we were quiet, the reality of it is it does not exist. And unless we speak up and fight on behalf of our issues, we see clearly that people like Morning Joe, who is a white conservative, people like so-and-so, whose name I won't mention, who's a white liberal, and people like so-and-so, who's a white progressive, whose name I won't mention, who love to roll out black folks to say, here's somebody's quote that conveniently fits my narrative and my political agenda. It's clear that those people aren't going to fight on behalf of our issues because they're literally telling us right now to just put it aside. Don't talk about it. Because if you talk about it, you're not going to be talking about the common good. But if we leave out the good of those of us, the many of us who make up a great percentage of this country, whose good are we really serving? We're not serving the common good unless we're addressing all of our good. Unless you just simply want America to remain at the status quo position, which is what, Bill O'Reilly?
The white Christian male power structure.
That is the default position of the United States of America, folks. This is not a controversial statement. This is merely the facts. This is not only the default position when this country was founded, but this is the default position today. Economically, politically, this nation is controlled by white Christian men. I'd argue just white men in general. And to ask us who are not white men, to simply put aside our politics, because our politics, I don't know, make you uncomfortable, or you feel as though the only way you can maintain power is by not elevating the issues of marginalized groups, because if you do, you feel like you're going to scare away white voters, white suburban voters, then don't we have a bigger problem in this country? Aren't you white liberal consultant and white progressive commentator? Aren't you a part of that problem? Aren't you saying that the best way for us to get political power in this country is to assuage the anguish of white people who don't want to talk about the problems that white supremacy created in this country? White male supremacy. And to all the white men in my audience, hey man, you know I love you. You know I love you. But if I'm wrong, send me a message and I'll show you where I'm right. But I know that if you're listening to me and you've listened to me any amount of time, you know that I'm right on this. America has an identity problem. It's in an identity crisis. And it's shifting. The country is shifting to actually try to become what the promise actually said at the beginning, that all men and women are created equal. And as we fight to make that happen, there is a tremendous backlash that's coming from people who are just either outright opposed to it and they want a separation, they want segregation, and they want an ethno state that is actually a thing that is happening now, that's a movement, or they're simply uncomfortable talking about it because it makes them have to confront the reality that they have a certain level of privilege in this country that is at the baseline. And if you don't understand that at this point, you just don't want to understand it. You can't wake someone up who's pretending to be asleep. That's all the time I have for you today. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. I hope that you're still a fan. And if so, I hope that you're still a patron. And if you're never a patron, why not? Go to www.patreon.com/the BPD show and become a patron today. I fudged that a little bit, and it's so important that you become a patron. I'm going to say it twice. www.patreon.com/the BPD show. Become a patron. Support the show. I'm going to keep bringing you fire content. You keep supporting. See you tomorrow. Maybe Joe Scarborough won't say something to tick me off again, and we can have a regular show. Talk to you then. Take care.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.